On March 3rd, 1972, humankind sent a message to space. A gold plaque aboard the Pioneer 10 bore a message for any extraterrestrial being that might come upon it. The man's gesture was meant to be a sign of universal friendliness, but even on Earth, people disagreed. Some thought it showed hostility. We can only guess what an extraterrestrial might think. It is a mistake to assume that our way of communicating is universal. Learning to communicate with people different from ourselves is becoming more and more important because of demographic trends. Today, 30% of New York's residents are foreign-born. Washington, D.C. is 70% black. Miami is 2/3 Hispanic. San Francisco is 1/3 Asian. Detroit is 63% black. And new immigrants are settling all over the country. 8,000 Laotian Hmong in St. Paul, for example.
Now we can add a different level of complexity by...
English will be the second language for the majority in California. Whites will be in the minority in the United States. Only 48% of the population. Diversity will be a reality in our daily lives, in schools, and at work. In education, government, and all kinds of businesses, the employee must often deal with people of very different cultural backgrounds and communication styles.
The most important skill that a person needs within an organization is the ability to communicate. And communication comes both from the point of being able to articulate or write out what it is you're trying to say, but also the ability to hear what someone else is trying to say.
I think the key in communicating is understanding who you're communicating with. If you don't understand the person and their own perceptions of whether it's what you say or your body language, how you're saying it, then you're missing the point. For you to walk into a room filled with people that are from different cultural backgrounds and think that you can communicate as effectively in one style versus a number of different ones is an arrogance.
Misunderstandings based on cultural differences can be irritating, but can also have some pretty major consequences. For example, decreased productivity, bad feelings in the workplace, and even some very costly litigation.
I'm not really sure what type of accommodations you have at home.
When people of different cultures communicate, misunderstandings often result not only from their words, but from the ways they communicate. In this film, we are going to show you 12 examples of typical misunderstandings that occur when people are communicating across cultures. These misunderstandings interfere with effective performance in all kinds of situations, whether teaching, managing, negotiating, selling, or serving customers. In this fast-paced, service-oriented world, service providers are often faced with long lines and short-tempered customers, a stressful situation making special demands on communication skills. Every language has common conventions for polite interaction. We expect certain formalities, certain courtesies, which others may dismiss as insincere chit-chat.
Okay, there you are. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Have a nice flight.
Watch what happens when this customer ignores the ticket agent's greeting.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very upset. I have had this reservation for 3 months.
The agent naturally feels defensive.
And the flight is full.
My wife must get on this flight. The whole family is expecting her.
In polite English, one disagrees by first agreeing. We say okay or yes, but.
Yes, I understand, but you didn't actually buy the ticket and the flight is full.
No, I disagree. The plane is not full yet.
This customer would not seem especially rude to another East Indian, but he comes across as very disagreeable to people who aren't used to this tone of voice.
I've been waiting here for almost an hour.
Sir, please calm down.
In some countries, much is left to the discretion of officials. So this customer expects flexibility, even favoritism. A difference of expectations adds to the tension.
But you didn't actually purchase a ticket and the flight is full.
I want to see the manager.
I think it's obvious that if you have two individuals that are not communicating on the same level, in essence, you have a total shutdown of any type of communications. One of the two individuals must stop and try to make sure that we eliminate that variance in there, that split of communications.
Well, I felt a little yelled at. If he'd just calmed down and told me exactly what his problem was, I'd have been able to help him a little more.
I have been in situations like that so many times. People don't try to understand. Maybe they just look at me and think I'm not important.
Good communications are really critical in any business environment because until you get the right information, it's very tough to make the right decision. So how do you ensure good communications? There are two ways. The first is to ask the right questions, and the second is to listen.
Good morning, how are you?
In customer service, understanding cultural differences in communication styles is vital. Understanding makes it easier for the service provider to listen and empathize.
The plane is not full yet. Not everyone is here. My wife is here.
Yes, I can see your wife is here, and I understand how disappointed you must be. And I'll do everything I can to help you. But first, I got to understand what exactly has happened.
We made the reservations.
Where some people may not know of alternatives, it is important to offer options.
First, I'll waitlist her on this flight. And if she doesn't get on this one, fortunately, we have other trips this evening. I'm sure I'll be able to get her on one of them.
Oh, thank you. I was so worried. I didn't know there were other flights.
There are never any simple solutions to misunderstandings. The only way to deal with them is to be aware that they can happen and to take the time to make sure that the communication can occur.
You've all had time to think about Bill's proposal, so let's get right to it. Any reactions?
I think it's innovative and workable.
I agree. It's definitely worth
Skillful exchange of information is essential in any business, education, or public enterprise. But the ways that people sequence information can be very different. Some people line up their thoughts in a straight line, leading directly to the point, one step at a time.
Staffing for growth. And third, the people we will need in place for the complete system.
The problem is that if we keep rolling along...
Others talk in loops or spirals. They start on a subject, but go off on elaborate details or variations on the subject, or related ideas, before returning to the main point.
That reminds me of another point that gets all the way around to the
They get to the same place in the end, but not the same way.
No matter how choppy the structure may seem, what it does...
The linear 1-2-3 communicator has a hard time following loops.
Every step of the way so that we have a very...
Both speakers are frustrated.
How do I explain it?
Cultural habits also influence people's ideas about when it is appropriate to discuss certain things.
If you contrast Hispanic and Anglo communication styles, let's say in an office setting specifically, if I were to receive someone who's coming to see me with a scheduled appointment, unless it's an emergency, because that changes things, I will rarely get into the matter at hand from the beginning.
I've been so busy promoting this great new line of equipment. And I'd like to talk to you about that system.
Is your family traveling with you?
No, not this time, I'm afraid.
That's too bad. Imagine traveling can be...
Instead, I will address a number of questions, probably for the first 3, 4, 5 minutes, about that individual as an individual, his or her family, experiences, anything but business. To jump into business directly can be seen as rude in the sense that you're ignoring that individual as a human being.
Would you agree? I'd like to talk to you about that new system.
And here we have the most beautiful brand in the world.
Differences in phasing in conversation are not just cultural, but regional too.
Salud.
In the North, for example, many people get right down to business.
Look, I learned long ago, you gotta go with your instinct. Okay, here's a deal and what I'm willing to pay.
Bill, you want a man to make a decision before coffee and cigars? Shoot.
While in the South, more time may be taken to establish a social rapport before talking business. To some people, logic and accuracy are essential. To them, if words are not precise, they are driven to clarify. This can totally derail others who perceive the relentlessly precise and reasoned communicator to be manipulative and domineering.
There are some things I'd like to clarify, too. So, what was on your mind?
Well, I think we have to figure out objectively and concretely the relative value of what you and I each bring to the table.
Well, you know I've been in the business a long time. I've built up a reputation. I created the market for this product. It means a lot to me.
Oh, I do appreciate that. And, you know, I've been in the business a long time, too. I just don't see how we can assign any concrete value to that. Now, I think what we ought to do is just discount the past and talk about what we will contribute from now onwards. Nothing personal at all. I just think we have to look at the numbers one step at a time.
Well,
problems also arise when people have different ideas about how argument should be expressed.
I don't know where you're coming from.
This man is more animated, personal, and confrontational. Others are relatively low-keyed, impersonal, and non-challenging.
Don, I am not trying to rip you off. In fact, I'm trying to eliminate those feelings by being objective. I'm just trying to come up with a formula that's fair. Now, here's the formula that I used. I just separated...
Some people argue impersonally, aiming for objective neutrality, not allowing emotion to interfere with reason. Others may distrust the motives of people who are emotionless and aloof in their argument.
Functions. I got the bottom line. I think that's the most fair approach.
Fair to whom? Stu?
When communications cause conflict, remember the conflict might have more to do with style or process rather than content. These differences may result from personality, but often they are cultural.
Don, I didn't know you felt this way about it. I mean, do you just want to call the whole thing off?
No.
Many minorities have a history of feeling manipulated, exploited, and victimized in their interactions with whites, and this contributes to their distrust of their style.
This project has been a major part of my professional life. It means a lot to me, and I'm not about to give it up just like that.
It takes time to develop trust. Trust is something that you earn. So I must learn more about them, learn more about their style, what they want out of the job, what they want out of life, how they've grown up, their own situation. And that starts with knowing more about myself and opening myself up. Because that's where trust starts. Am I willing to tell you about me before I ask you about yourself?
This business could be very big. And I think it's important we get into it.
People establish trust in relationships in culturally different ways. This woman starts with general principles.
I am interested. I think we can agree that we'll do this together. Then we'll work out the details when I get back from Hong Kong next week, all right?
Well, we need to consider some.
But this man wants the specifics, feeling the sum will be the total of the parts.
In terms of how we divide the equity.
Mr. Richmond, you're a very clever businessman. But how can we worry about such details until we see what...
She is concerned about the commitment to work together and feels he doesn't trust her.
A really great team.
Yes, but let's separate the forest from the trees.
He wants to talk about the terms and feels she is dodging key questions.
Cash or in-kind services. Who's going to be responsible for...
Yes, of course. We'll work it out when I get back. But I think we need to think of the long term.
But of course I'm interested in the long term, the big picture.
The result is no deal, a loss for both of them.
Whose group is to do what?
Some cultures are more verbally expressive than others. Some Americans are very inquisitive and chatty, while American Indians, for example, may tend to respect silence and privacy.
Hey, you're new here, aren't you?
Yeah.
What's your name? My name's Evan. What's your name?
He is trying to be friendly, but she perceives him to be nosy.
Oh, God. Oh, wow. What kind of name is that?
He thinks she is cold and rude.
Are you from South America or something?
No, I'm Cherokee.
An Indian. Hey, that's great.
Once again, differences in styles are the problem. Some people value candor, telling it like it is.
Raj, what happened? I beg your pardon, sir? You promised...
However unpleasant, the truth is paramount.
I had everybody in my department expecting them, but they're still not in.
Other cultures place a higher priority on courtesy or harmony.
Very well, sir. I'll reschedule your work as priority.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
They are no less honest, but they have their own ways of communicating real meaning.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Most minorities, because they have to prove that they're just as good as, will tend to not ask the questions. If you ask the questions, you're vulnerable. You're open to a whole slew of, they didn't understand what I said, they're not bright enough, can't think, have to take them through all of this, and boy, this really did turn out to be a risk.
I thought you said you understood.
Asian cultures, to save face, will say yes. And it isn't necessarily a lie as much as it is, I will try, I will do everything, I'll make sure that it's yes. But to say no blatantly is an insult.
If you're dealing with an Asian person, and I guess as we discussed, and he said yes, 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 and yet then you know that maybe he's not necessarily agreeing with what you're saying, then you need to test that. One is to rephrase your question or your suggestion. Second is to draw from that person some response in terms of action, in terms of actual agreement in his own words, and not just rely on him saying yes to what you say.
Okay, great. Well, let's see you try it. That's it. Great. Do it just like that. Only now, instead of using these keys, try the function key.
A manager can, I think, gauge the proper response to a question, and I think this is a good technique for everyone, independent of culture, by summarizing what he or she thinks the conclusion of the conversation was. Is this what we agreed on? And it seems to me that's a very simple technique that then people can respond to. And if there's hesitancy on the other side, then I think one can draw the conclusion that perhaps there isn't full agreement on the answer.
The most important thing to improve communications is to communicate consistently, fairly, and openly. Understand your audience, just like you would market a product or sell anything. Understand your audience, who you're talking to, and how that message will be received.
I think that basically we have to be careful. And when I say careful, I mean from the perspective of the sensitivity of the people that you're trying to communicate to. I mean, we have to extrapolate the fact that the recipient of your communication may view communication
A
with
common mistake people make is to try to impress others by speaking the way they think more educated people speak. The key is simplicity.
There's a better way to say this. You have to watch what you say or you might offend your audience.
I'm especially interested in this job because it's important to me to work with people I like, on a product I respect, and which will allow me to spend more time with my family.
Another mistake we make is to judge the ability of others based on their accents.
I'm especially interested in this job because it is important to me to work with people I like, on a product I respect, and which will allow me to spend more time with my family.
Who will she choose for the job?
Probably the man with no accent.
The person and his words were identical, but the impression is very different. People often make wrong judgments about others' abilities because of their accents.
Hi, Barb. I hope I know his name. All right.
In today's fast-paced world, telephone and telex are efficient ways of reaching people and vital to everyday business. But when communicating electronically with people of other cultures, it's important to use the medium appropriately.
Juan, I want to talk to you about tomorrow's meeting. You got a minute?
Sure, why don't you come on over and we'll talk?
Well, I don't really have time to come over now. No, let's just talk now.
How about I go over there?
Oh, that's not necessary. There's just a few
People of some cultures tend to prefer direct, personal contact.
We'll talk.
Yes, it's,
The telephone also makes it hard to get the full message when people communicate with gestures.
other end. There's a switch on the top, and there's also one on the bottom.
Or to sense the feelings of the speaker on the other end. It's always best to use the telephone to enhance, not replace personal contact.
I'm looking forward to seeing you again.
It's difficult communicating across cultures. It's especially difficult to communicate about differences.
All right, sure, that sounds good.
Many different subjects that are difficult to talk about, like disabilities, sex, sexual preferences, race. They're difficult to talk about because they're so emotionally charged. The consequences that differences of opinion never get aired out, so misunderstandings occur frequently.
I haven't had a real evaluation in a year. I'd like to know how I'm doing.
Now, this is a no-win situation. What can I say that she won't take the wrong way? Don't worry about it. You're working at typically acceptable levels of performance for your job classification.
What's that supposed to mean?
In fact, you probably have an advantage, being an attractive young lady. You have good social skills. People like you.
Comments about looks or personality can derail the employee who is legitimately striving for an honest evaluation and clear direction.
I asked for feedback, didn't get it. And he never even looks me in the eye. I feel stupid asking again and again.
Frustrated, good workers may withdraw or become dysfunctional.
I give up.
Giving negative feedback to someone with whom you don't have some pre-existing relationship and basis for communication is particularly difficult when we're talking about across cultural lines, minorities, foreigners, what have you. It's virtually impossible to do it in a riskless fashion.
Often when you have a white male in particular communicating with a black female, they both tend to walk on eggshells. The white male is reluctant to give them an honest assessment of their performance because they're not quite sure how the individual is going to react. And so people put off giving an accurate assessment of somebody's ability because they don't know how to approach the subject. And what happens is the subordinate is led to believe that everything is fine, everything's okay. One way around the problem of not getting timely or accurate feedback on your work is to take the initiative to encourage your supervisor to give you feedback. And you can do that by having your supervisor sit down with you on a quarterly basis rather than waiting for a whole 12 months to go by before they assess your performance.
Your results are good, so there's no problem there. I mean, you've surpassed all the monthly quotas. But you're not paying enough attention to the administrative details, like the information you put on the inventory forms. It's causing problems in stocking. Here, let me show you a specific example.
Feedback is not the only problem. Reluctance to communicate about differences causes people to make decisions for others without consulting them.
You know, Laura's coming with us on the fishing trip this year. She's not going to like being the newcomer. She'll probably think that we're asking her to pack the lunch because she's a woman.
Yeah, but all the new kids on the block have to do that.
Sometimes people are blamed for decisions they didn't make.
Well, I guess we just won't go this year. A lot of people are going to resent it, but I don't see any other way. It's a pain, isn't it?
The only solution is to invite employees to have a part in discussions.
This is a special time for the team to get away on a retreat together. But maybe the fishing trip just isn't appropriate anymore. At least not the way we've been doing it. I'm open to suggestions.
When discussing gender or any ethnic issues, it's always tough because it's a very sensitive subject. It's charged with emotion. People get concerned and wonder, what are they leading to? I think it's in organizations, especially large organizations, it's something people have to be very careful about. You don't want to avoid discussing issues that need to be discussed, but you need to be very careful about how you approach them and when you bring them up.
Did you hear the joke about the...
And you need to be thoughtful in how you express yourself. The things you say can have unintended results. Like jokes, not everyone will find them funny.
There is absolutely no role that ethnic jokes can play in the workplace. They do not belong there, should not be there, and are a reflection of the individual and the organization's racist posture. Because an ethnic joke told about any group of people can easily be told about your own. And that is the clearest signal for minority that people only see stereotypes and are not tolerant of differences.
And be careful with the words you use. Many of the words and expressions we use without thinking can be hot buttons, causing rage or suspicion or hurt feelings.
A hot button for me is one day this nice lady walked up to me. He go, "Well, I admire you. You always dress so nice and color coordinated. I wonder, you hire somebody to dress you up every morning?" And I find it very offensive.
I'm offended by the phrase, he throws the ball like a girl.
Boy and y'all, why do y'all do these things?
Some of my best friends are black.
Let's do this like a Chinese menu. Column A, column B, and column C.
Sexist. I don't like being called a sexist.
I hate for women to be described as emotional, as if that were a pejorative term.
I'm really offended by expressions like, "Don't be such a Jew," or "Can't you Jew the price down a little bit?"
How tall are you? That's not nice to ask short people, or tall people.
Sometimes you hear people say, "My children are acting like wild Indians," and that offends me.
There's a stereotype the Hispanics are party people. We enjoy a good time, but we are also a serious and hard-working people.
The word minority is a word that irritates me personally. And the reason why is because I always, after I hear it, say to myself, well, minority in what context? It implies something negative to me. And I feel as though if you consider the whole human family, I am then not a part of a minority.
I'm not prejudiced. That's the first signal to a minority person that we have a problem. Uh-oh, let's time out, let's start on this one because it's going to take some time. I'm open, I'm not prejudiced, I know the issues, I'm a product of the 60s, I've been in the wars, and I'm liberal. So someone like that is going to take a lot more education than someone who says, I know my upbringing, I understand I have prejudices, and I learn how to manage that. There are times where I can't control it, and you might see that. And we need to work on it together.
Yes, I can see your wife is here, and you must be very disappointed.
In order to perform well in the multicultural environment, most of us need to become better at communicating across cultures. We can start by learning to listen.
It means a lot to me, and I'm not about to give it up just
by learning to respect differences.
Do it just like that.
By testing for understanding.
But we need to consider some details first.
By adjusting to the communication styles of others.
I'm open to suggestions.
By communicating clearly and fairly.
What's your name?
By remembering that when misunderstandings arise, a difference in communication styles may be the problem. Whoever we are, our way is not the only way.